Hi, welcome to the episode of In Conversation with Industry Experts interview series. I hope you guys are staying healthy and staying safe in whatever part of the world you're living in. As you know, with the advent of new technologies, smartphones, digital application, we have started redefining or defining a new area of interest for us. Businesses are trying to find novel ways of wooing their customers, on trying to get them better experiences than ever before. This area is known as user experience or UX in short. As you know, these are the interview series that we bring in to create deeper awareness in this field of exciting digital innovation. And today's topic, as you can guess, is UX research or user experience research. And we are joined by one of the most renowned experts of this field, Eduardo Gomez Ruiz. So, Eduardo, I would like to welcome you to this interview series.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure.
Excellent. So, Eduardo, since you are one of the experts, why don't we start with a quick introduction?
Well, UX, as Norman Nielsen defined it, is the set of all abstract and more core elements that define the user experience and define whatever interaction a person that uses a solution, product, or service has with it or with the company. So in simpler words, it is everything that surrounds an interaction between a user and a service or a product. So that could be a car, a smartphone, an app, a website.
I think this is one of the areas where most of us have some knowledge about UX experience or user experience or UX in short, but a lot of us probably have just a little bit and then we get lost, And you mentioned some very critical elements. You talked about how you interface with your cars or how you interface with other electronic gadgets. I mean, this is something that we don't normally associate with user experience compared to how we interact on our smartphones or how you interact with online apps like this. So that's good to know. Share some examples if you can to kind of illustrate what user experience is for our viewers.
Yeah, you are very right in mentioning that, because there are tangible elements that we can notice have been designed, but there are also some intangible elements that make our experience much more pleasurable and that maybe we have not noticed or thought that this was actually designed. The whole service, from the moment that you notice you have a need until you have engaged with that solution or with that company and you're safely back at home, is a service that has been fully designed. So, for example, for almost the past 3 years, I work at Uber, and every part of the service that you have or receive from the company is actually designed, whether you see it, that you are interacting with the solution or not. Everything that happens from the moment that you notice that you have a need to go somewhere until you reach your destination and you're kind of safely rating or giving feedback about how was your experience has been thought of and designed for it.
Right. I think Uber is one of the best examples that most of us can relate with. Now, typically, it may not be Uber, but where would a company start its journey if they have to get involved in the UX space?
I believe everything starts identifying what are the needs that you are aiming to solve. And we do that through UX research. It can be done formally by an actual UX research team, where I was part of, and I've been dedicating a big part of my professional career to. Or it can be done simply by interacting with those users or those customers, even if not done in a very formal setting. So I think the first stage is always the identification of the problems and the user needs. And from there, you move forward to define, okay, what do we want to do about this? Is this something we want to solve or make easier or make cheaper? Or is that something that we don't want to get into, but should always start there in those needs?
Right. So, just for articulation purposes, would it be possible for you to share an example of what the user feels. Say, for example, I'm saying Uber, but it could be any. What would you define as an interaction with customers, in order to give a better articulation of the subject?
So here you are putting me in between two lines, the lines of being an expert and the lines of being a person who empower anybody to connect with the user. So let me rephrase a bit the question.
Sure.
And work it out as any potential interaction to learn what the customer needs are. It can be considered, in a way, research.
Yeah.
How well you do that, it would
Yeah.
define if you are kind of a craftsman into doing that or you're an amateur. So as
Right.
you asked me about the first steps, I'd
Yeah.
say that first steps can be something as simple as reading some of the feedback, customer incidents that the customers share with the company, listening in to support calls. This is normally a very typical activity I do when I organize immersions from HQ headquarters to being on the ground. Normally, salespeople are in direct contact with customers, and they receive that direct feedback on a daily basis.
Sure.
The difference of doing research in a more formal setting is that we use proper research methods, and
Right.
they may start from being surveys, diary studies, where a user share on a frequently basis some of their experience or interactions with the solution. Or it can be qualitative interviews, and in-depth interviews are one of the most common methods, where you have a set of topics you want to discuss and you make sure that you don't ask them in a way to receive a yes/no answer,
Right.
or in a leading or biasing way, but rather to discover and understand how the user sees it. So it's all about building empathy with that other perspective of the user.
Yeah, I think building empathy is key to the whole process. Now, once you conduct the UX research or the user experience research, right? How do you go about putting it in some form of an application or interface? How does that process work?
So after gathering those customer feedback or responses, we go through an analysis process that is normally done in groups, where we fill the wall of Post-its, or now that is also transitioning, especially in this remote setting, to digital. But
Yes.
imagine an infinite canvas
Yeah.
where you can put Post-it of your different learnings or findings. And then what you do in this analysis process is identifying patterns. What are some of those patterns that better reflect or answer the original research question that we had? And from there, you formulate insights. And after those insights, which are novel pieces of learnings that define how your users respond or feel or think about a certain topic, you create solutions out of that. So I work with designers, product designers for the most part, who design those digital interfaces that solve the problem that we have identified in the first place. And then from those initial solutions, we test them again with customers, and then we see how well are they solving the original problem. And if that goes well, it goes through production and development through our IT or developers.
You mentioned about product designers. What are some of the teams that you have to work with on a regular basis with respect to the UX?
There are plenty of teams. So starting from UX research and teams that support that research, that we call them research operations, people who help us have the right processes, recruit the right people, and ensure the quality of the entire process, to designers who actually understand and package that problem and later visualize some of those concepts, to copywriters. So actually, designers are not always writing what you see or interact with. Those messages are thought of by experts called copywriters. And a big part that plays an important role in defining all these and orchestrating all of this is product management. So product managers are those product leaders who establish the vision and organize the whole team setting to reach that vision. And now more than ever, data is super important. So we have teams of data scientists or data analysts that help us with inputs and understanding about what are the actual behaviors we are seeing in our company that determine which direction or which problems should we solve for. So they are an integral part of this development process.
What are some of the products, the way you would define them, your teams would define them? What are some of the ways that you cut, slice and dice this whole interface or the whole interaction?
So this type of segmentation or separation into smaller part of the experience happens normally in larger organizations or corporates like Uber. So you normally separate by your user segment. So there is one app for the drivers, there is one app for the riders, there is one app for the restaurants, there is one app for the couriers that bring you the food. And then within each of the apps, there are groups or teams that focus on onboarding the user, on monetizing that user or any type of money relationship. There is a team that focuses on loyalty or retention of those users, activation. So depending on how specialized the teams become, you have more product teams. And sometimes you have up to 20 product teams for a single app.
You mentioned about UX and you mentioned about product teams, copywriters. Now, I'm assuming not everybody gets it right the first time, especially with the dynamic world that we live in. I'm sure there are a lot of experimentations that are done. Now, who would typically do these experiments and what would compel the teams to conduct these experiments and how do they go about experimenting?
So normally the data scientist team defines the experiments in collaboration with the broader team to define, okay, what are we aiming to learn? And this has a lot of parallelism with the research process. Because you first define certain research questions you want to measure or test against. And for example, if your experiment is an A/B testing, you want to see how your user base respond to a treatment or a change in your solution versus control. And then you compare if there is an improvement in the metrics that you want to move. And normally in that experiment, you don't know why or how is this improvement happening. And this is where UX research brings a qualitative layer to inform, okay, this is responding or yielding better results because of X, Y, and Z. And this is how we go about experimentation. Before we have a final product built, we are testing different parts of it in increments and see how the user base responds to it.
Is experiment essential part of every time you do an UX, or is it sometimes you do experiment, sometimes you're very sure of what the users are asking for because you've already got the data, or is it in each of the UX, that's a research that you conduct all the way to the product management, that there are at least 10 experiments need to be done, or 20 or 100 or whatever, give us a bit of a flavor of what we're talking about when we talk about experiments.
Yeah, it's a hard to answer because it really depends on the nature and the context of what change or what solution you are willing to ship. But in general, what you aim to do is shorten the product life cycle. And by that, I mean the time that you take to convert an idea into a reality, into something people can touch. And first, that is done through prototypes, which are non-functional for the most part. And then you test the prototype with the assistance of a moderator. But when that prototype is almost working, you release an alpha. I'm using very technical words. I don't know if that could help. But you release a portion of your development and see how early adopters would use it. And normally you use people that you can trust in a control setting to see how much is your solution solving the original problem. And from there you go into beta testing, which is you put it out, you let more people try it, and then you see how these people would respond. And after that, you kind of start rolling it out to the broader user base. And those experiments are a controlled way of putting a new solution out there and see what problems they have. And even if you've done a lot of research and a lot of iterations, normally those solutions are not perfect, because
Sure.
that's the nature of this development, is that we are innovating, we're creating something that wasn't there before, maybe in the entire world. So we are aiming to advance the status quo, and by that we try new things, and then we see if those things work or don't work. That's
Right.
why we use this control way of exposing your unfinished or imperfect solution to the world. And the problem I see is that many companies wait too long until they expose their solution, and sometimes other digital native companies who maybe start later are earlier in the market because they don't mind taking the risk. It's seen as a good thing, like you are a risk taker and you put your solution that is unfinished, that not might fully work, out there in the market.
You mentioned about work or doesn't work. Are there certain guidelines, certain measurement yardsticks that you use, saying, you know what, if this is the experiment we're conducting, or if this is the research that we're conducting, these are the milestones that we need to reach? How do you put those yardsticks,
Absolutely.
measurement?
Like before, and I can give you a very concrete example, but before you actually start the experiment, you define what are the success KPIs and
Mm-hmm.
also the break glass scenario, which means
Right.
that if we are really underperforming, we're going to stop these experiments before we hurt more people or the experience of more people. And so if you underperform, you are kind of breaking the glass, then it's kind of a red alarm, red flag, and
Right.
we pause this thing.
Yeah.
If we actually achieve in the given period that we have the success KPIs, then there is a promise to scale this solution to more people. So if
Sure.
we actually get to convert more users to pay, if you get them to stay longer or engage more with your product, then this has been a successful experiment and we're going to do something about it, and we're going to continue developing or scaling this solution.
If you look at a typical sort of initiative, a UX research-based initiative, um, would you call it a big project, mid-sized project, small projects? And I'm coming from a lot of the people who are involved in the technical space or the technology space and the digital space. They come from kind of the old school thoughts, where there used to be large transformation projects that could last 1.5, 2 years, ERP implementations and kind of that, right? Whereas some of the new sort of digital enabling technology based projects are like very nifty, very small scale. So describe to me a typical UX project.
Wow. I'd say that if you want to discover a space that your company has not worked on before, you start
Mm-hmm.
with a research to investigate what are the actual needs, aspirations, or frustrations in this field. And that
Yeah.
may range, that we call a discovery research, and that may range from 1 to 3 months, depending on how comprehensive it is. I did studies in 5 countries, and that involved a lot more travel, and that take into the longer spectrum. But
Mm-hmm.
if we want to add a feature, and that feature is a small increment to the core service or product that we have, that
Sure.
may take only 2 weeks to test. So from some concept or sketches to some set of interviews where you can validate the response of your users, that doesn't take any long. And by doing that, you can save a lot of time in developing and programming all of the solution and designing the high fidelity prototypes, because
Mm-hmm.
what you are doing is you are moving everything earlier. And as I mentioned before, putting things out there and taking that risk a lot sooner.
Mm-hmm.
And the principle under this is the Agile principle, where you fail soon and often so that you learn faster.
Faster,
By
correct.
learning faster, you get earlier to the market, and you nail or kind of get to the right solution or the right direction of the solution a lot sooner.
Right. So are you saying that in order for people to work with UX research, agile is the way to go about? People should not at all look at the waterfall model, or would you say there are still some places where you could use the long drawn waterfall model compared to the agile approach?
It depends a lot to their organization and what I've seen. And I've worked recently at a company that implements the agile, and it's also kind of time boxing each of the activities, which means that if in this given 2 weeks frame you have not been able to do more, then now you need to move to the next thing. And I don't like to be, I use the word Taliban or like extreme into how much you follow a particular method.
Methodology, right.
In fact, in my field of UX research, there are predefined methods that are kind of tools in my tool set. And I don't use a tool as it is. I actually adapt the tool to my context, to my needs. And I end up designing a hybrid tool that has something of here, something of there. So in a way, I like to be flexible and do whatever makes the most sense. And this is what I see most companies missing, like common sense. You don't have to be absolute and extreme about this way of doing it. You just can give people the empowerment and the trust, and they will do their best with whatever the resources they have.
You've highlighted one of the areas that we constantly tell people. People get caught up with these methodologies. They get caught up with the format versus the substance. Agile as a philosophy allows you to fail fast, learn faster, whereas people tend to get boxed in, like, I need to do a sprint for 4 weeks and that's it, and then you need to move on. So very, very nicely put about creating a hybrid model.
One example that I really love about my previous manager, her name is Aswati, and she would tell me, I like you and my team to have a percentage of your time dedicated to this thing that we are working on, but 20% of your time should be dedicated to a more longer term strategic topic. Think about it and tell me which one fits best. And that will allow you to play into the short, medium term, and also to play into the longer term and more strategic road mapping level. And I think if we all dedicated a portion of our time to look at the bigger picture, we would ultimately make better decisions and work more as a collective group.
Right. Now, changing gears, from a UX perspective, are there any holy cows, i.e. processes or functions that you say, or experiences that you don't want to touch?
Wow. I think there are principles. There are principles about privacy of your participant and respect. No? So whatever we do or ask, we always start by saying the user, hey, feel free to leave at any point. Feel free not to answer a question that you don't feel like answering because it's private or you just simply don't want to respond to. And there is no right or wrong answer. This is all about your experience. So those are principles of respect and privacy of the data, and using that with certain precautions so there are no leakage. Then I believe there is another principle of being neutral and objective to the data you gather. So back to the original topic I mentioned about doing some sort of research or doing a more formal research. The difference is that you are very objective and very neutral and transparent about your process and how you concluded certain insights. out of the evidence or facts that you gather. So being transparent about that process and being very objective to the things that you learn are also very important principles into this. And I don't want to mention particular methods because that will again kind of box
Sure.
our area of expertise.
You've had experience working for both large companies as well as some of the smaller size companies. In the large companies, especially in the conventional companies, whenever you need to do something, whether it's experiments, whether it's projects, they always ask you for a business case. Is this something that, in your experience in your area of work, how prevalent is the concept of asking for a business case, return on investment kind of thing, versus more of, hey, here's a budget, keep experimenting, come up with better ways of doing things, and if it works, we get better customers?
There is a mix. There is a set of empowerment to explore things, but you always have to be transparent towards your bigger stakeholder group. So normally we used a type of document that is not a business case, but it was RFC, is request for comments, which means you can propose doing whatever you want to propose that fits the company strategy, but you need to expose that to your peers and some people in different teams, and they would comment, and then that process could get approved or not based on how well you are addressing business needs and user needs in this proposal. Amazon uses something very similar where they have a 4-piece system, and you kind of describe what you're aiming to do, and then there is a whole peer review section where that gets approved or rejected based on how well it is actually addressing each of the segments. So
right.
It's a bit of a mix, but the process in general is faster, more agile, and gives you a bit more freedom than the top-down process that is more traditional, and we're doing this, and then you execute on that voice or order.
Right, and in the RFC, which is a request for comments document, I'm sure there is an emphasis on the idea itself and what is it trying to address the market. Are there some numbers mentioned there? Financial numbers, the amount of population it's going to impact. Are there some quantitative details captured in those sort of documents?
Normally, yes. Normally, those numbers have to do with the success KPIs we mentioned before. And you normally need to demonstrate that you're making progress towards those metrics, not necessarily financial. It might be engagement. It might be sure. The bounce rate or how longer they engage with the service than simply a dollar figure. But right. Those numbers are the ones that will be used later if the project gets approved to measure your success against.
Right, and I think that's a sort of critical shift that we see, a very different kind of shift that we see, ever since the advent of digital technology. Because in the past, everything had to be financial, everything has to have an ROI and all of that stuff. But now, if the goal is to get 4 million users, then that's the goal, right? And because you, as a startup or as a company that is in the digital space, it's not necessarily what's the value per user, what's the average revenue per user, ARPU, the other metrics that gets used, but it's essentially I need 4 million users signed up, and that shows the validation of the idea in the market compared to you need to invest $1 million. What am I going to return? Getting in return in 1.5 years. So
yes, yeah. It is true. But while that is true, it can be also misused. And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So imagine that I make a campaign, where every user that downloads this app will get whatever reward. And I've been advising a company now, a startup in Singapore. And they have seen an increase in downloads and first-time users, but just to get the reward, and then they've never engaged with the service again. So I think that is kind of manipulating a bit the numbers, while
Sure.
those initiatives to increase downloads didn't drive or direct us to the right set of users and didn't solve any problem. It was simply an acquisition channel, as you could do all sort of promotions or kind of paid ads to get those people. So while that is true and that is important to kind of validate that you are solving an actual problem, if you're using those artificial ways of pumping up the numbers, then you are not really investing the resources in the right solutions and the right ways of getting the word out there.
Right, and I think that's a very interesting question, interesting scenario that you pick up. What would you advise? I mean, how would people? Because this, I know, a lot of people make mistakes, and in fact, I've been involved with a particular startup digital hotel kind of a setup where they were discounting room rates in order to acquire customers, and one of the things when I was reviewing them, I asked them, I said, listen, a person who's paying $200 a night is of a very different profile compared to a person who's paying $75 or $50 a night, and if you discount off the $200 room to a $50 room, what are the chances that the $200 paying guest would actually avail of that $50 versus a $50 guy coming in and saying, yeah, that's a steal, I will take it.
Exactly, like you are burning cash to get and attract the wrong person.
Right. So what would people do, or what would companies need to do in order to get a reasonable metrics in place? Any thoughts on that, or any advice that you would like to give to people?
I used a system that was impact driven, but I forget the name. Maybe later I'll email it to you, and then maybe
Sure.
you can put it in one kind of little banner. But the intention is, if we want to achieve this goal, and that goal needs to be hairy, but it has to be also realistic.
Correct.
What are the different dimensions or levers that we want to move? And I'll find that technical name of the process for you to include it. And it was really interesting. Like we need to increase, let's say, revenue, and we can do that by increasing the number of users or increasing the price. And then how to increase the number of users, and then there are kind of 3-4 levers, and how to increase the price might be, and then there are a set of levers as well. So I believe that top-down and then bottom-up process can land and yield more concrete and achievable numbers, and then you need to figure out which initiatives map out to this set of levers to actually achieve that goal, and then kind of split that target among the different groups by influencing those metrics.
Right. Now, a couple of questions back, you had mentioned about engaging and collaborating with customers, and you had alpha customers and beta customers. And again, people coming from conventional industries often struggle with the idea of how can I share things with my customers when the product is not ready, so they have this kind of mindset block that prevents them to engage customers, on one side, and on the other side, they don't necessarily feel comfortable giving or thinking that customers may be willing to do so, as in participate and co-developing the products. How would you go about creating this collaboration with customers, putting the customers in their skin in the game of sorts?
Yeah, I have actually, it's not a hypothetical solution. I have gone through that process, and first you need to coach the organization and start contributing to that cultural and mindset shift, that to do the right thing, we have to put the customers first. And while we are putting them there, every decision that the business makes is well aligned and mapping well to their needs. And then second, by bringing them to the field. It's really easy after, like, you can be in 10 different meetings, repeating the same story in many different ways, and your executives may not buy that idea. And then when I see that, I say, wait a minute, let's organize something next week. We're going to do this next week, and you're going to come with me. And you're going to be at first just observing, and maybe you can ask some questions as well. And after they are there for a couple of sessions, they thought, oh, and they even say, oh, how was I kind of so stubborn that I thought it was this way? And I'm actually seeing that they actually need this other thing. So sometimes the experience and bringing them to the field to have the experience is a lot more impactful to change the mindset than trying so many different things. So you need persuasive people who can make those leadership and top executives come to a middle ground, even if not fully convert them into being like user advocates, middle ground. And that middle ground will show them, hey, this is the way. And very quickly, I was there and my executive was telling me, from now on, if it doesn't have customer impact, I don't want anybody to be working on that idea. And then we immediately shut down a project of 6 months duration to refocus and pivot towards the right direction.
Right. And would you kind of extend the same approach of persuasion and engaging, like you engage your stakeholders, the same way you would approach your customers? Would you say the same? And I'm just going to extend that thought one more. When we talk about customer collaboration, who are we talking about? Are we talking about the CEO of the customer? Are we talking about kind of the middle manager? Are we talking the frontline guys? Who are we talking about when we talk about customer collaboration?
Yeah, in fact, I don't use the word customer that often. I prefer using the word user.
Right.
And by user, it can be anybody who interacts with the solution. So back to the Uber topic, it was the driver, it was the person, the passenger who gets the thing. But if we go into a more traditional service, for example, like advertising things, you can talk to the people who see the ads and engage with that content. You can talk to the advertisers themselves, or even to the people who make the delivery possible between the advertiser and the buyer. So it's really about defining really well the user. And from then on, you can decide how to engage with that user and how much do you want to bring it to co-design with you or co-create with you, or rather kind of test with that user whatever solution you are working on.
What are some of the challenges that organizations face when going through UX research?
First, I think the lack of awareness, and I am very glad you're doing this because many organizations don't know about this, and they don't know about the impact and the value that the research can bring to them. So once they know about it, we are already half of the job is already done. Second is they have processes that may not fit completely this mindset, and this mindset may end up stopping projects like I mentioned before, or suggesting other projects. And now, how do you incorporate that into your process if you define strategies every year? So what I see more and more is that companies are reviewing those 3-year strategy plans a lot sooner, maybe every 6 months. And then I think after you know about it and you are bought into the value, it is really easy to start piloting things and testing things. Maybe not in your cash cow, but you start in some new topics. And that's why there are many R&D departments. Right. But sometimes those R&D departments don't have the right innovation focus of, okay, let's engage with the user. They are so much into technology and what can this technology enable and what would be the numbers or the models. So once again, when you have the right mindset, then you start doing that a bit more. So I believe it's a combination of factors, but after there is awareness and there is some sort of budget, then things start to flow and to build that new common sense that will align everybody. Because the beauty of becoming customer-centric is that the confidence increases into making the right decisions, and the disparity between different opinions, especially of big bosses and big leaders, kind of reduces the intensity, because now there is evidence that this is the direction and these are the problems that we need to solve, and not those others. And that increases the purpose and the sense of belonging, because as a team, and I was really proud of one of the projects that I worked on, because suddenly we were seeing how the work of 6 months of a big team of 100 plus people was influencing millions of lives of drivers who were suddenly loving what Uber was doing for them. So you immediately notice that increase in your morale, in your cohesion as a team, because you are all aligned towards the same purpose. Let's reward the right drivers and make them proud of what they do. So it's all about that human connection, that something that you and I share clicks, and from now on we're connected regardless of whatever idea or preference we have in mind. We are connected by this thing, and this thing has been given to us by a user.
Looking into the future, since you are already in a very pioneering field yourself, and now if you were to look beyond the current state we are in, what are some of the future trends and some of the future excitement that's going to take place in your space that you think?
I anticipate, and it's already starting to happen, that the trends of privacy and transparency will be broadly adopted. Normally, companies have a lot more information than we know, and having a sense of control over what happens to our data, the data that we are giving out most of the times for free, will be a big trend. And we start to see Facebook doing things, WhatsApp doing things on that, but we want to make sure that our data is used carefully, and controlling that data will become a new trend. So the companies who do that best will retain their users or attract more users a lot easier. Then with this coronavirus, I anticipate that remote working will become a new normal. And this will open up so many possibilities. For example, I use a lot a tool called Miro.com, which is a digital solution for collaboration. So imagine a big wall that I was mentioning before with post-it, but now those post-its are digital. Yeah. So how can we create new things together while you are in your home, I'm in my home, and maybe another colleague of us is in India or it's in Singapore? How do we work together, and how do we create new things and align together? And another trend, and we start to see in driverless cars and all sort of human-machine interactions. I think they will conquer more part of our lives, because you suddenly don't need to connect to another human to solve a problem. You tell a machine directly or indirectly, and that problem gets solved. So the more routine type of task will be somehow eliminated, freeing up time and space for us to do whatever we most value. And the last one, and personalization, I think has been discussed so many years now, but I think more and more with the whole overdose of information that is out there, like curating and personalizing the experiences will be a trend that will continue to be there. Now that I'm working with VR, virtual reality, and also augmented reality, I see that those experiences can be even more personalized, and I am excited about what is to come. This is a very nascent field, but I am anticipating. I'm working with a startup called Spatial.io, and they help you meet another person or another group of people in 3D, and the experience is so realistic that you are kind of looking at each other, walking around each other, and then interacting with 3D models that you are seeing from your own home, and it feels so real that it's daunting. You may want to not go to the office because this thing makes it so easy. And for people who are used to collaborate remotely, like connecting to the previous topic, but now with this add-on topic of virtual reality, you may have multiple new options to solve problems and communicate ideas in a whole different way.
That's a very, very interesting idea. So essentially using virtual reality to have meetings, especially in like times of current crisis. So have 5 or 6 people in a room, virtual room, but they have the feel as if they're in one single room. When do you think that's going to be mainstream? When do you think that sort of technology, I know is available, but when do you think people will do mass adoption on that?
Yeah, I don't want to put roof like under my like stone under my own roof,
Yeah.
but what I believe is that for sectors like education,
Mm.
design, even IT development, those things will start to become assets or resources to make our work a lot more efficient. So imagine
Sure.
that you have to travel 100 people of your company every month for them to have meetings.
Yeah.
So imagine that those travels sometimes are Europe to America.
Yeah.
If you save just 50% of those by having a headset and
Mm.
making sure that the system is working smoothly, I believe the trend can really accelerate quickly. But there is also a lack of awareness of this technology, and the technology needs to be designed with a very usability like centered type of thing, because you
Sure.
get absorbed into another thing. And one thing I told them the first time I used it is, hey, the time flies and there is no clock in this reality, and
Right.
I don't want to miss my appointment with the doctor. So
Sure.
what can we do? And they told me, no, we are implementing a clock very soon. Okay. So designing the right things and making sure the usability is good will definitely make the adoption happen a lot faster. But I don't know. I cannot say a date. I'm not an expert to anticipate that.
Right. Right. Well, I guess we will continue observing that and monitoring that very, very closely in the next few months, few years. That we're going to look at. One last question for the people who are aspiring to get into this space, or for people who are looking at engaging the UX teams in their own sort of businesses. What would be, let's say, your last tip of the day for them?
I think be curious. Everything starts with this empathy, and if you're curious, to ask people like the same way you are doing. Or I tend to get a lot of messages in LinkedIn about, hey, do you have an advice for this or for that? And those people who are curious become the winners, because they are doing something no one else is doing, or not everyone is doing. And by being curious, you can ask questions that maybe have not been asked, and then start thinking or connecting ideas that nobody else has. So I'd start there, and I'm reachable. I really like engaging and connecting with people. So feel free to share my LinkedIn details or Medium details, and then we can start new conversations from there.
Excellent. I guess you took away my last question, which was essentially what's the best way to connect with you. But you prefer LinkedIn, I can guess from the answer
Yeah,
that you
I
gave.
engage. Yeah, I engage with LinkedIn on a daily basis, reading content, sharing some content of my own as well, and also messaging people. So happy to do it that way.
Very good, very good. And maybe some of us will again meet in the future in the virtual reality world as well.
Look, it's so realistic. You don't notice it is virtual because is an avatar, 3D avatar of yourself, and it looks so realistic. It's a bit freaky.
Excellent, excellent. Eduardo, it was such a pleasure to speak with you. You have provided so much of insight, so much of information that normally you don't necessarily get by reading books, or even by many times when you're actually in a situation, you get caught in a situation, you don't see so much of details. But this was awesome. This was brilliant. So thank you so much again on behalf of me, of course, as well as FifthChrome and all the viewers who will be watching your interview. So with that, I would like to thank you. So this was the episode of interview series, which was focusing on digital innovation, and our topic today was user experience or UX research. And if you find any value from these interviews, if you find any insights coming out of these interviews, then do make sure that you share this interview with your network, with your friends, with your colleagues. And if you like to keep continuing listening and viewing more videos in the future, then don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So with this, I would like to bring closure to the interview today. I would wish all of you stay healthy and stay safe. Until next time, goodbye.